Hello and welcome again. Today I would like to talk about the physician of the gods, the goddess of healing. I'm talking about air. So I have actually been wanting to talk about air for quite a while now. She is definitely up there with one of the deities that I worship. And honestly, it's a very personal but touching story that started at the beginning of my journey of Norse paganism. I was kind of hesitant. I just didn't want to air out too much personal information, but honestly, if I'm going to be sharing my journey with you, this was a big factor in my journey. So I will get to that story later, but first I want to talk about who Air was. Well, according to the Prose Edda, she was the best of the physicians amongst the gods. According to the Poetic Edda, she lived upon a hill which was referred to as a healing hill. And that is it. That is all we know. Unfortunately, there are no more poems, there are no more stories that we can look up and see what she did exactly, how she healed, what kind of remedies. Was she just a physician for the gods? Was she physician to be worshipped amongst the old Norse people? We just do not know, unfortunately. But the interesting thing about that, and I will get to this in a little bit, is she is very prominent in modern Norse paganism, even though Old Norse paganism, we have little to no idea about her. So because we have little to no information about Air other than she was a physician of the gods and that she was a healing goddess, all we can really do is speculate. And that is a recurring thing in Norse mythology, is speculation. And it's something that many scholars continuously debate to this day about Norse mythology and various aspects of it, Air definitely being one of them. So Air, it has been discussed that Air may or may not have been a Valkyrie. We do not know if she was a Valkyrie at first and then she became a physician of the gods, or if she had a dual role, or for that matter, if Valkyrie was just a loose translation of goddess, or vice versa. I, for one, do like the idea of her being a Valkyrie first and then becoming the physician of the gods. And it would actually make sense. Now, when we talk about Valkyries, they were women who would do Odin's bidding. On the battlefield, they would be the ones, per Odin, to pick the best and bravest of those who were slain in battle, to bring to Valhalla. So I'm picturing the Valkyries riding onto the fields of battle, and they are choosing the dead, and amongst the dead are probably some that are wounded, some that are slowly dying, and it's my personal belief that Air was there as Valkyrie to heal the ones who were not ready for Valhalla. She was the one healing the ones that deserved mercy and that they had much more of a life to live. And this would make a lot of sense, her then becoming a physician of the gods. Perhaps she showed so much potential in her healing abilities that she became the chief physician of all of the gods of Asgard. Now, when it comes to practicing modern Norse paganism, worshiping air is something very, very personal. However, amongst many of the heathens that I have met who worship air, it's more or less the same. That, you know, if they have an ailment or if a family member has an ailment, they pray to air to help heal. And there's one distinction there, not necessarily asking air to just 100% magically come in and heal the person in question. A big part of it is allowing air to bestow upon the actual doctors and nurses that are working on the person to have the knowledge and to have the wisdom to make the right choices. Basically, they want to have air swoop in not only to help heal the person, but to have the doctors some help, give them some help, and possibly give them that eureka moment, which is what Ocean Keltoy called it, that eureka moment when the doctors are trying to figure out what's wrong with somebody, and then, oh, that's it, and then they're better. And I think that makes sense that in modern times people are worshiping air more and more because of how advanced our medical technology is nowadays. You know, there's things happening in hospitals all over that appear to be like miracles. So if you're a Norse pagan and you're seeing miracles happen and you're praying to air, odds are it might be working. And this actually leads me to the personal story that I would like to share. Now, just a heads up, this is a story about premature birth. So if anybody is watching that has experienced or knows somebody who has experienced premature birth and this may or may not be a trigger for you, I just want to let you know before I tell this story. Now, about a year ago is when I started my journey into Norse paganism. Started off as a curiosity, and one thing led to another, and I just loved it, and it started to become more and more religious for me. And then I had a nephew born. He was born 15 weeks early. He came in weighing about 2 pounds. He could basically fit in the palm of your hand, and the poor little guy, he had a hole in his heart. His lungs were collapsing on a day-to-day basis. Things were not looking well for him. The doctors were doing everything they could for him. It just was not looking good for him. And of course the family is, you know, we're getting the updates of how he's doing and oh, you know, please keep him in your thoughts, please pray for him, you know, and everybody in the family did. And me being on this new journey, I thought, you know, well, maybe this is time I put this to the test and see what I can do, see if I can ask the gods for help. And the first thing I researched was there a Norse goddess of healing, which led me to air and the little known information about her other than she was a goddess of healing. So I gathered some offerings for air, and I remember I also had a little shot of whiskey for Thor, asking Thor to give my nephew strength to survive and pull through. So I really just, I sat in front of my fire pit with the offerings, and I just, you know, prayed my heart out. I said some of the most heartfelt things I've ever spoken to the gods about. And this was really early on in my, you know, my journey into Norse paganism too. So I also remember saying at the end, if you are listening to me, if you hear me and you share my concern, please give me a sign. Fast forward to the next day, I go out onto my deck and there is a fox's skull just sitting there. And I froze. I stood there and froze, and it was like I had seen a ghost. Like, what are the odds of a fox's skull just sitting there? There is wildlife out here, but I mean, wildlife does not play with remains. And there were no other remains anywhere in my backyard. It was just the skull on my deck, and that was it. Nothing else to be found. So that really was a moment where I just stopped and said, wow, okay, I wonder if that means they heard me. And then fast forward to the next night, I am telling my wife the story about the fox's skull, and how I had asked for a sign for the gods, and how I had prayed to the goddess of healing to help intervene and to give the doctors and nurses the necessary information to help heal him. And she kind of paused and she said, well, that's interesting because my dad texted me. The doctors were not very confident that he was going to make it, so they scheduled him for surgery the next day, which just so happened to be the day that the skull was delivered to me. As I like to say, it was delivered to me by the gods. And that day, the doctors came in, they were getting everything ready for surgery, they were checking him, and he healed overnight. The hole in his heart was gone, his lungs were no longer collapsing. He miraculously healed overnight. The doctors were baffled. There's still no medical explanation to it to this day. And in that moment, I thought, wow, I think I'm really onto something here. And from that day on, I dove deeper and deeper into Norse paganism, and the rest is history. So I actually have a couple of offerings. This morning I poured some water, and I have some bread here. And for air, I have some peppermint spice ground up, and my homemade pineapple mead. Air, I give you this not for favor, but for friendship. Skull. And at this time, I would like to introduce the latest addition to my altar. I treated myself to an air statue. It's hand carved out of wood, and it is beautiful. So my incense is lit. I have my offerings out. It is now time for me to say the prayer, and I'm going to do that on my own. I have some personal things that I would like to say to air. So while I'm doing that, I will put a portion of my prayer on here. But if there's anybody out there watching who themselves are going through any sort of medical issues, ailments, if you have loved ones who are going through some serious medical issues or ailments, I'd like to take this time to offer my thoughts for you, and keeping air in our minds and taking a moment and being grateful also for those she has already healed. In this journey and watching my rituals and the way I pray, obviously do whatever pleases you. Another thing I do is meditate to air. I picture myself wandering down a short path. After that path is an opening and a gate. The gate opens for me. I walk down another path. It's some huts in like a little village. And I passed a few huts in the village, and I find myself at the bottom of a hill. I go up the hill, and air is waiting for me. And as I'm meditating, I try to reach out to her. I try to talk to her and you know, let her know what's on my mind. And I thank her profusely for what she's done for me and what she continues to do for me. And that is really just one of the ways I honor her, and for that matter, the rest of the gods and goddesses. And the timing of this video that I'm putting out there, my nephew just celebrated his first birthday. So I thought now, better time than ever. Thank you for watching. And remember, ek gang, that i, time skom, ek valda. See you next time.